Yeah, thank you all for coming. This is our series for ecologies of communities. Very enjoyable so far. Thank you to Reba for sponsoring us. They're very kind. Jubilee.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ben. We are lucky enough today to have both Simon and Nicholas, who both lead the practice from London. They are well known for their research-led approach, which includes scientific rigor, alternative perspective, and concern for the planet. And it's also really cool that Simon Astridge did his part 1, 2, and 3 at Portsmouth. So it's really inspiring for us students who go here. Yeah, I'll hand over to Simon and Nicholas now.
Well, thanks, guys. I'll show my screen. Can everyone see this? Yeah?
I'm good.
Yeah, the amount of times I've said that in the last 12 months. Yeah, so thanks for coming, guys. It's great to be here, speak to you. And so yeah, I'm Simon, and this is Nicholas, and we both previously ran our own architecture practices for 5-7 years in London, and about 12 or 15 months or so ago, we decided to join forces and launch Szczepaniak Astridge. And we've known each other for a long time, and we used to work with each other at previous practice, and we've kind of come together because we realized we've got similar goals and threads and themes to our work. And we obviously, when we got together about 12 months ago, we sat down and we really sort of it was a nice chance to kind of analyze what we had done previously separately and what we want to do going forward together. And we're still feeling and thinking our way through that process. But essentially what we try to bring is this approach to working over many different scales. Nicholas in particular has done lots of art-based installation and sculpture-based, and we do shopfront windows, we do one-off houses for clients, coffee shops, hairdressing salons, and all the way up to master plans for 400 villas in Southeast Asia. So we really do work at all scales, and that's something that we're really passionate about. So when we sat down a year or so ago, we were really trying to figure out what it is we do, what defines us, how do we want to move forward. And we kept coming back to this word sensory. Sensory in terms of we're humans, we live in the real world, or at least we think it's real, and we sense things through our perceptions, and we know we have senses, and we appreciate the physical and the metaphysical, and it's really about that like haptic approach. And many of you studying at Portsmouth will know Juhani Pallasmaa and how he talks about how we live and sense in the world. We've all got dreams, desires, and fears as humans. So it's about portraying that through architecture. So as I said, we're inspired by many things. We're inspired by people, what they do, architecture obviously as well, but particularly art. And Nicholas and I, over the years as friends and architects, we've visited many installations together. This one in particular is Olaf Aliassen, you may recognize. And it was a 15 or 20 meter tunnel that was put in an art gallery in London, and it was filled with rain droplets and smog. So you couldn't see, you just got glimpses of people, shadows, and you couldn't define the barriers of the space. It was almost never ending. And then you couldn't see a meter in front of you, but if you had your hand here in front of your face, you could kind of see a limb. It was a very sensory experience. Christo Jean-Claude, we were very lucky enough to visit this. We took our small practice to visit this installation 2017. And it's temporary architecture. It's two artists who are sadly no longer with us. They produce artwork with their own hands. They sell it for millions of pounds, and they use those funds to build their art. And in this case, it was a couple of kilometers of 7 meter wide orange floating pier that connected all these islands in the lakes of North Italy. And the beautiful thing about it was its temporality. It was put up overnight. It was there for 2 weeks. It was free to experience, and then it's gone. Gordon Matta Clark is one of my heroes. That movement in the 1970s and 80s in New York, that wasteland buildings and Jean-Michel Basquiat and hip hop was growing, and Gordon Matta Clark was sitting in buildings that were abandoned, and he just one day began cutting holes in them in shapes and became renowned for it. And stuff like this really inspires us. We use it a lot in our projects.
Sorry, Simon. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, just a quick thank you for inviting us. And having known Simon for 10 years, he's always spoken so highly of fondly of his experience that he had at Portsmouth. So it's a real pleasure to speak to you today. And just following on from what Simon was saying, yeah, we look at artists to kind of contextualize our own work, but also to ask questions. So this is a photographer called Edward Batinsky, who shot the shipbreaking yards in India. And I think images such as this, they kind of question and they make you aware of the decisions that we make as humans might have an impact, not necessarily directly in front of you, but somewhere else in the world. And you know, and ideas about recycling, but also perceptions of scale. You know, that the scale here is completely ambiguous, and that's quite an interesting thing. This is Richard Serra, and when the lockdown relaxes, you all must go and see this at the Saatchi Gallery. It's called 2050, and essentially it's an illusion. It's an architectural illusion where actually this pool of oil is 2 centimeters in depth, yet it looks like the depth is infinite. And also the reflection, it changes your perception of the scale and the volume of the space. And I think the thing that this image just can never convey is how potent the smell is when you walk into the gallery. So you experience this piece before you see it. And that's an interesting thing to us. And then we also ask questions, and we're very interested in experimenting with materials. So this is Dilla Scofidio and the Blur building. And you know, can a building be made from water? Does a building have to have a shape? You know, this is made from water vapor, and it changes in the wind, and it's ephemeral. And not only do we design our buildings to react to the weather, our buildings, we see them as having their own weather environment, being their own weather environments as well. And then I think finally, one of the key things that seems to crop up in all of our projects is how do you experience light in a physical way? Light is an incredibly abundant material, and it's something very ephemeral. And this is James Turrell, and he explores light as like a physical thing, this space is painted in a material that emits particles, so that when the light hits it, it gives it like a physicality, and you feel its presence. So I just thought, because obviously you guys are in your undergrad, we thought it might be just quite interesting just to quickly talk about how important student work is, and how it can help you, you know, define how you might want to practice in the future. So this was my thesis project. Yeah, next slide, Simon. And I think really my passion for experimental materials began here really, and my early work looked at, I took caramel and started doing these kind of prototypical little objects such as this. And next slide. Became interested in how a material might change its state under different temperatures, so how something can go from a liquid to a solid under different temperatures. Next slide. And how you might use that to support an object in an almost unreal way. Next object. And what's particularly interesting about this material is that it's hygroscopic, so it reacts to water vapor in the air, and it kind of it reveals something that might necessarily normally be invisible. So the next slide shows experiments that show how it reacts to different humidities, different room temperatures, different thicknesses of caramel. And this is not a real kind of building material in a sense, but it gives you an idea of how a building material might perform in a metaphorical way. So this became like the inspiration for the thesis. Next. And in conjunction with that, using kind of drawing as a tool for exploring, but also finding ideas. And I became very interested in how an object or an architecture might look like it could be triggered or respond to an environmental change. Next slide. So the thesis project was 10 environmental coastal defense towers, and these were almost like barometers that reacted to the climate changes and was like a warning device to mankind, revealing shifts in environmental condition. And I'll just quickly run through these, but this was like front elevation of the tower, and they were kind of made up of components that were triggered by water vapor. They reacted to the wind. They created their own weather conditions. So they would, as weather conditions changed, they would stress and they would creak and groan, and their states of visibility would change and they would disappear. Thinking about the different scales of the architecture, so moving from outside into inside, and what that transition, what that threshold might be like, going from a very light space to a very dark space. So dark, in fact, that you might actually lose the sense of scale, you lose the idea of where the ground plane is. So you can see like some of those early ideas that Simon and I have been talking about that we saw in the artist references start to kind of inspire some of the spatial experiences in some of these drawings. As the architecture creeps and groans and reacts to the weather, apertures would appear and open and close, revealing these kind of shafts of light within the spaces. And then moving on from that, some of the ideas using caramel, when I graduated, we were quite keen to try and use this idea, but more in a commercial environment this time. And we approached Tate and Lyle sugars. You can kind of just trot through these if you like, Simon. I'll talk over them. But yeah, so that Tate and Lyle are a household brand in the UK. They refine cane sugar. And we approached them with this technology where that I developed as a student. We became interested in the history of sugar and how before it was a commodity, it was used to kind of portray the wealth of an individual or a family, and these kind of really incredibly crafted objects were made. So we were very interested in using it as a craft, but rather than using it at this smaller scale, we were interested in creating something of a more architectural scale that you could experience and create an environment from and actually walk through. So obviously, like, I think people's perception of sugar, when you say the word sugar, it's this kind of white granular substance. But at the time, obviously we were very interested in its caramel form and it's the performative aspect of how chefs use it and how they stretch it, and how it's like this thing that you just want to watch. It's a theatrical thing. And at the time, Tate and Lyle were very much trying to sell their specialty sugars and the whole baking trend. And we became quite interested in the different colors of these sugars. And that had a relationship to the amount of refinement of the sugar, but also their tasting characteristics. So we had tours around their plant in East London. And what's really interesting about this is the cane sugar being delivered off the ships. And each one of these mountains is from a different area. And the people who work there can identify where the sugar has come from just by its color. So I think this mountain in front was from Fiji. And so we took 4 of these sugars and we created a set of caramels using them. So this was the lightest golden granulated sugar. So the caramels kind of started to portray the characteristics of the particular sugar. So the golden syrup caramel looked like golden syrup. The muscovado, as the darker the caramel became, the more opaque the sugar became, until the muscovado, which was much more kind of fudgy, much more opaque, and let less light travel through the material. Yeah, so altogether, we started to see these caramels as telling a story about the tasting characteristics of the sugars. And we became incredibly scientific about how we created these aesthetics. So this is actually the same sugar, but taken, heated to different temperatures. And we created a whole spectrum of color. And this shows you just how much control that we had, where they're exactly the same recipe, the same sugar, but the caramel on the right was taken to 10 degrees higher, I think 180 degrees, whereas the one on the left was 170. And we documented all of our recipes, and so we could recreate these sugars in a more controlled way. So the proposal for Tate and Lyle was, rather than they asked us to kind of create a PR event to sell their sugars, and we wanted to create something spatial, these 4 caramel rooms, but we wanted to very much create something that was theatrical. So you would enter this space and you would be confronted with these kind of 4 reflective pools of caramel, and these rigs would drop from the ceiling, and then they would lift, and these 4 caramel rooms would emerge, and then people would be invited to kind of walk through them. And taste and actually eat and lick the architecture. And these are some images of one of the models that we made. And then we actually created a prototype of this that Simon will come to in a moment. Let's see if this plays.
Fingers crossed, everyone.
And I will talk over this a little bit, but essentially, obviously, up until this point, the experiments that we had undertaken were at a kind of table scale. But as I mentioned earlier, we were very interested at trying to make this of a more architectural scale. So we had to kind of upsize everything, and materials behave very differently at different scales. So here we used afro combs because of their finger-like projections, almost like acting as pen nibs, and they were 260 in this particular device. We were kind of borrowing technology from the theatre world. So this was like a fly rig, and we were using like an agricultural trough on the bottom. And we were very interested in kind of showing the process here to the audience. So seeing the sugar go from one state into its sugar state into the more caramel state, seeing it melt. The smell of this was absolutely incredible. It was so sweet, and it completely created this immersive environment. The stirring. There is some quite nice music to this, but
you're not here. I can hear it.
Oh, good.
Okay. Sorry, you guys.
So this was like the very first time we ever performed this experiment at this scale, and it was quite a spectacle actually to kind of see this. You'll see in shortly how this liquid-like material turns into almost like a glass-like sheet of almost 3 meters tall.
How many times did you have to experiment with it before it came a good one?
Luckily, this was the very first one, but I think what we learned over time was how to kind of improve the aesthetic quality of the caramel. So this was incredibly like granulated, which was a quality in its own right. But over time, we made it much more glass-like and a lot more refined and.
Dries so quickly, doesn't it? You can see it becoming wet and solid straight at the top.
Yeah, so you can see here, this was a later study where the caramel became a lot more kind of refined and had this like really beautiful kind of transparency to it. And also the life cycle of the material was very important to us. So that kind of the circular idea of it degrading over time as it absorbed water in the air, and then it could be remelted and reformed. So I think you can probably stop that here actually, Simon, and move on to the next project.
Okay, thanks, Nick. So this project, we're going to show you alternate projects that we are working on. So this is a project for VP Creative in the fashion industry, and we finished the project a year ago, and she was really eclectic taste, and we created these almost like scrapbooks for her to sort of gather all this information that she wanted to incorporate into her house, and we wove the books in house with a embroider. And one of the first things that was mentioned in the brief was the acts of bathing. You know, that the whole house really was designed about the bath. That was the most important thing to her, and how, you know, her life crazy, flying all around the world. Well, it was until a year ago, and having the fashion industry is very demanding on hours, and she needed a place to retreat to just guiltlessly linger out and chill out. And this is a precedent we showed her, which is in a 7th century ancient bathing site in Sicily. And it's actually carved out of the rock 100 meters underground, and there's a spiral staircase that accesses it, and it's a communal bathing place. And it's these wonderful little pools are just shaped perfectly for one human to step down in them and sit, and then they're angled, so you've almost got this communal bathing meeting place in the middle. This is an image of the final project, and as you can see, we really try to create a dark atmosphere there with one roof light. Lots of really carefully thought through concrete, and this on the left here is a void that sits next to the bath, which goes down to the kitchen, and on the right hand side is the bath itself. And these were early models and diagrams that we were testing the idea of bath and casting and how you enter and exit, and you know what it's like when you get into a bath, not a traditional bath, you've got to sling your leg over to get in the depth of the bath, but this was all about how you ascend and descend into that space in a controlled, almost like a spa-like setting. And as the project developed, the house is actually situated in a fantastic area in southeast London, a very diverse area, and there's lots of history on the wallpaper. When we were stripping off the paint, there's lots of bright layers of histories of wallpaper over the last 130 odd years that the house has experienced. So we cut them out, and they kind of defined a palette, a textual palette for the project. Yeah, I mean, I use this quite a lot. I really love this quote, and I think it really does sum up what we're trying to do in our sensory architecture. You know, the hands want to see, the eyes want to caress, and yeah, this is part of the kitchen. You know, you've got a timber ceiling, you've got beautifully cast in situ concrete, you've got a stainless steel fridge, and then you've got green thick gloss walls, and yeah, my eyes want to caress that. I just love that combination. There's a combination of colors and textures, and like I do, Nicholas and I talk about a lot. Like we both like cooking, and you know, that sensory thing in architecture, I think is really closely related to food. And you know, like sometimes we choose materials that if I know I want like taste that material, I think it's going to be a good one for the project. And we nicknamed this sink the salami sink, which we designed for her bathroom. So you can see the void at the top of the image there, which goes up into the bathroom. So this is the kitchen area below. And, you know, the idea was to insert this concrete sculpture into this existing urban fabric, you know, from the foundations to the slab, to the walls, to the ceiling, to the bath itself is all one sculpture, concrete sculpture. This is a table that the client designed. So again, playing with color, playing with gloss, matte, and how that palette works together, balanced. This is a view from the ground floor extension from the rear garden. And we conceived and designed this extension as a timber jewelry box that was open and closing. And Rachel, the client, she loved to hear the noise of rain when the doors are open. I don't know if you guys have probably experienced that. It's such a lovely thing to know there's a storm happening outside, but you're protected, you know, prospect, shelter. So we designed a 0.5 meter exaggerated pitch overhanging eaves and these centrally pivoting doors. And the assembled, the Turner Prize winners actually built this elevation for us.
Cool. I'm conscious we've got quite a lot to talk about, and there's I think we've only got kind of 20 minutes or so. So that's
yeah.
So this was the this is a project that we won through the RIBA Regent Street Windows initiative, and we were partnered with L'Occitane, the French skincare brand, and this is their store on their flagship store on Regent Street. And we were tasked with creating an experiential installation for their shop window, and we were very inspired by, we went right back to the origins of the brand, coming from Provence, and we were particularly inspired by the amazing kind of light quality of Provence. And a lot of people talk about the golden hour, and if you look at their products and their marketing and the fact that the brand is very yellow, a lot of the products are named after this light. So we thought it'd be very interesting to kind of try and create this moment of pause and bring the golden hour from Provence to Regent Street. So we started experimenting with lenses to start understanding how light would move through them, and we were very interested in creating something that would have an experience from a macro scale, but as you move closer towards it, there would be like a more human kind of micro scale to it also. So essentially it was like a veil that we created from 2000 lenses, and it acted like an optical device that would expand and contract the light and illuminate this space. So, and I'm walking up closer to the installation. Each of these lenses would kind of morph and deform the view of the shop beyond. One of the parts of this brief was to kind of create an Instagram moment. So it was how our briefs have changed over the years, but that was a new one at the time.
Yes, indeed. This is a project we completed 3 years ago, and we were approached by a tile company to design a porcelain gallery for their products. And the site's in central London. To access the site, you had to go through a tunnel, and then you had a backland piece, an old car park essentially. So we designed all these boxes for their products and organized all the systems for them. And porcelain is actually 99% clay, and it goes through a kiln and is fired, and it's added with gloss or other bits. So we traveled to the factories of the clients to understand that process, and we thought it was quite important for visitors of the showroom so everything they touch, from all the handles to the handrails, to be made of clay by a ceramicist. So we did this in-house, and we designed this handrail, and it's kind of got that dolly mixture, sweetie vibe, and a texture on the top to communicate with your thumb. This is the courtyard. We used 4 10-foot shipping containers that the clients actually use to transport their products around the world. And we opened them up and played around with them, and we had 3 red ones and a yellow one stacked at the top, orientated towards an angle of a tree. And it was really interesting to meet these craftspeople and how they weld and understand the limitations of that, of these shipping containers. They're kind of like a cardboard box. Like when you take one end off, they kind of like fall over. So you've got to be really careful what you do with them structurally. And our site was next door to the very first social housing project in London in the early 1900s. So we had to spray our shipping containers the same colours as the bricks.
Cool. And then we've been working with this brand now for I think this is the 6th year that we're in from when they started up, and they commissioned us to kind of reinvent the traditional barbershop, and we went right back to the origins of the barbershop. And interestingly, it was a place almost like a community hub. It was a place where you go to listen to music, play games, and have medicinal treatments. This was an image that the client gave us, and they were quite interested in how the barber was represented in the film Sweeney Todd, and particularly the spatial environments around him. So the store is located in Dubai and also America now in New York. And essentially, we were trying to create this kind of dark atmosphere that we observed in the Sweeney Todd film. So joinery envelops the space, and it's gridded and it has depth to kind of create this depth of shadow. But then at the same time, introducing stainless steel beads to the end of that joinery to kind of catch the light. So there's kind of this dialectic and play all the time with the light. And the spaces are very dark, with the idea of you lose the sensation of where the edge of the space is. And the volume of the space becomes ambiguous. And we work very closely with a particular photographer, and we have discussions about artists such as Edward Hopper and how he represents his work. And screens are integrated into the space depending on where the natural light travels, and these kind of wash the space with like a tobacco colored light. And then in the massage rooms, the most important elevation becomes the ceiling. And again, kind of this whiskey colored light using the bottles that house the massage oils kind of creates this light pattern around the perimeter of the space.
So we last year we completed our first coffee shop in London. And many people, when you say coffee, do you want a coffee to people? I think many people think like, let's go to Starbucks. And that very quick, Americanism of coffee. But the reality and the history of coffee is very different. It does have ceremonial links to Arabia, where coffee was first originated. And it does have that, like the Japanese tea ceremony. You gather, you sit, you brew a pot, you pour certain ways, there are customs. So we were really interested in this because on the left-hand side, you have an espresso machine that created 95% of the income to the client, flat whites, lattes, mochachinos, and all that stuff. And the customer experience of that, normally it's in and out, they don't really sort of hang around much. And then on the right is the kind of the original way of drinking coffee, the sitting down, the waiting for it to be poured, the heating up of the pot correctly, pouring it the correct way, and it's a lot slower to deliver it to you, and it's a lot slower to drink. I don't know if many of you know, but coffee is a fruit. A lot of people are surprised when we say that, and these are actually pages from the book we presented to the client. And coffee they're like little small cherries, and what they do is they pick them and they leave them out to dry. And then the seeds are popped out, and then those seeds are then roasted and then crushed, and then you have them with the coffee. And it's like, I've got Rick Lepasture quote there. It is like winemaking, and the various coffees from different regions of the world taste different because of the acidic and climatic values of that. For instance, in Ecuador, you get and the Caribbean, it's a lot of a caramel taste, more chocolatey. This is the project here, the finished project. It's a mid-terrace in Kensington, and the client, it's a 4-story building. And what the client wanted to do was he wanted on the top floor to have his studio. On the floor below that is his working office for Lift Coffee. And then on the ground and the basement is where people enjoy the coffee, and that's the coffee shop itself. So obviously these are early sketches that we produced, and highly influenced by Gordon Matter Club. Peeling away, taking out the entire ground floor, peeling voids away, introducing vertical elements. This is an example of how the filtered coffee is poured at the back. Again, the slower process. And yeah, since doing this showroom, I must say I'm off the lattes and on the black coffees now. The film on the left was Nick mentioned earlier about a film a client recommended, and they do that to us, and we love it. Watch this film, Simon, on the left, because the light in it is exactly how I want the light to be in my coffee shop, and the painting on the right. So we design a lot of the project has a metal staircase, because the voids are opened up and it's a 4-story building. There's lots of staircases and balustrades for the project. So we designed those, and we dipped them in these potassium chromate tanks. And we did that for 2 reasons. One to stop them corroding, and 2, to have this beautiful iridescence of light bounding around the place as you walk around. And this is a photo from the actual dip. I sent this to Nicholas from the factory, and he said it looks like a butcher's, like pieces of meat hanging in the window. And this is an image of the finished basement, and you can see from the dipping of the concrete in the potassium chromate that where you have corners, it's almost like a rainbow. You know when oil spills on a puddle in a car, you have that lovely shimmer. The whole space is like that. So whenever you move to the left or the right, all the shadows change, and it's constantly moving and evolving with light. This is an image of the studio flat on the top floor. It's kind of like Tokyo in Kensington in London. The client's from Hong Kong. Cool.
So slightly jumping scale here, but this is a project that Simon and I worked together on right at the start of lockdown last year, actually, where we were invited to participate in a competition to design a new headquarters for a PPE manufacturer. So the rubber gloves there on the bottom right, they're based in Malaysia, and we were these are their competitors, and often what you find in these kind of tropical climates where they've kind of imported this international style are these kind of very opaque looking glass buildings, because the sun is so intense. The glass has this incredibly tinted nature, which we wanted to avoid. And at the same time, this company, enormous company, it makes 60 billion gloves a year, didn't really have an identity in terms of its kind of brand. And architecture has this amazing, it can portray a company's values. So initial conversations with a client were kind of educating them about this, really, and kind of showing them buildings such as these, which evoke characteristics of that brand, and we very much wanted to do the same with our proposal. One of the things that we were very interested in straight away in Malaysia was the climate. It's a tropical climate, as I mentioned. It's very humid, which makes it can make it quite uncomfortable to be outside, and particularly the transition between inside and outside. Often the insides are climate controlled environments, and going from inside and outside, there's this thing called thermal shock. which can actually create nausea. And we wanted to create a building that was very in tune with nature, and where the outside and the inside was very interwoven. So it was quite prescriptive in terms of a volume that we were given on the site. And we kind of divided this mass into its program, and it was quite interesting. So there were R&D departments, a ballroom for 1,000 people, banking and administrative kind of functions. And we wanted to kind of break up this massing to give it more interest, but also to provide shading, introducing these courtyards and this balcony right around the edge, which became what we called a green belt with gardens integrated. And we identified that there were kind of 4 different facade types that were needed depending on the function of what was going on inside. This building was really all about working with the climate in a passive way where possible. So the step massing provided shading. These courtyards introduced a diffused light into this very deep floor plan, but also gave us the opportunity to interweave nature right through the building. And one thing that Simon became an expert in during this process was feng shui, which was quite dear to the client's heart. So integrating water and nature throughout the building was very important. And we also wanted to connect the building to the manufacturing process of these rubber gloves. So we looked at the rubber tree plantations and the grid-like nature of them. And we also looked at this incredibly beautiful tapping process that is kind of carved into the tree trunks that act as like little gutters to collect the rubber latex. And we use this to form a geometry. And using this in plan, we found that actually it would work very well as like a brise-soleil, where because of the very oblique angles of the sun in this climate, these layers of brise-soleil would create shading. So this became the green belt. It was like a social space where people could, it was kind of in-between space between the inside and the outside. And it was there for environmental reasons, for social reasons, to prevent glare to the inside working spaces. And these are some of the kind of the final visuals that we used to successfully win the competition. So this was one of the courtyards. This was the kind of the front elevation. The ballroom space, the public space, was kind of this glass jewel in the middle of the middle of the massing. And at night, the client liked the idea that this would be a bit of a landmark to the local community of Clang. So he had this idea of it glowing like a lantern. And this is a view of one of the terraces outside the ballroom. So these large, quite dramatic overhangs would provide shading that would allow these spaces to be usable.
Okay, back to London project. This is a project that's live currently in for planning for new build offices and apartments in Brixton. So as we do, like you do at university, we researched Brixton, and we found out that it had there's an avenue called Electric Avenue, and it was actually the first electrically powered shopping centre public space in Britain. And we thought this was really interesting, landmark for the area. And any of you that visited Brixton will know that it's a huge, diverse, amazing place with huge food markets, and anywhere where Bowie was born as well, I think is quite cool. And even the Brixton have got their own monetary value called the Brixton pound that you can use in certain shops. So we were really interested. This is a really sustainable project for us, and the client was pushing it. So we started doing these diagrams, thinking about how is this building constructed and what is the embodied energy. So obviously sourcing timber, using timber as much as possible for structure, SIPS panels, minimizing steel connections, and then it can be demolished and recycled in the future. What is the operational energy of a building? It's energy it uses over the lifetime of use. You know, if you buy electricity from green sources, if you top it up with photovoltaic cells, if you push that energy through ground source heat pumps, boreholes, it comes back up, it's 7 times the amount you bought. And you use that energy for the building, obviously, and then you can even sell it back to the grid. Due to the food link of Brixton and the electricity link, we discovered a process called an anaerobic digester. And they're kind of mechanical plants that are usually used by the MOD on submarines. And you basically, you put all your food waste in them and they digest it. And they, at one end chucks out compost, and then at the other end is electricity. So we thought, wouldn't it be a good idea if our site was a little commercial hub to collect all the biodegradable waste from the Brixton Village food, which there is a lot of. You collect that waste, you take it to your site, you pack it and sort it, you put the food waste through an anaerobic digester, you use the electricity, you use the compost to grow vegetables, you have a growing community in the apartments above, and then that food is eaten or sold back to Brixton Market and the cycle starts again. This slide was drawn before COVID hit, but how relevant is it now with people living in spaces? You know, we know that cycling and growing and cooking is such vital to our health and happiness. On our larger sites, we talk a lot to the clients about what's the site used for, because sometimes planning can take 3-4 years. So a site's just sat there dormant. So on this project, we're proposing a car wash facility that collects grey water and uses that water to clean the cars. And this is the concept as a street in the sky. So you'd have an office on the ground floor, and then above you'd have these apartments that were very light and bright, and they were a growing community. And as part of them occupying these apartments, they had to grow the food and veg and take it from the compost and help sell it back. So it's like a continued community. And this is a sketch of what that may look like. On the right-hand side, the apartment, in the middle, the communal stairs, and on the left-hand side, the south-facing communal garden where everyone's growing together. And this was the final visual that we produced, which is in for planning at the moment, decision due any day. And finally,
cool. And then finally, yeah, so this is another kind of live project, in Southeast Asia in Cambodia, in a place called Kampot on the south coast, about 2 hours away from the capital. And our site is about 20 minutes away from the town centre. It's a very rural site. We're right next to the Elephant Mountains. It's an absolutely incredible scenic landscape. And this is an area of outstanding natural beauty, a World Heritage area actually of the Bakor Mountains. So this is the site, and it's 19 hectares, and these are some of the views. It's incredibly panoramic, and every vista that there is like this panoramic view. One of the things that Simon and I were very interested in is the relationship to water in this region for growing food. There's a water festival at the end of the rain season. Fishing is very much part of the community, but also more ideas about purification, so cultural ideas. And alongside there is looking at site influences, picking up on particular vistas, level changes, but also working very closely with like prevailing wind. And these diagrams here just give you an idea of how different this climate is to where we are now. It's one of the wettest places on Earth. So the diagram on the top right in particular, the light green is London's annual precipitation. The dark green is Kampot. So water was an incredibly key theme throughout. And as well as kind of looking at climate, we're also looking at, this is a painter, an American painter, but who actually documented many tropical regions. And we became very interested in how there are different layers to this. So you have foreground of landscape, a midground of water, with then the panoramic view in the background. And we wanted to kind of capture those things and integrate it into the way that we might think about the site. So the site is 400 units in total, 200 apartments, and then 200 villas. The layout is defined by water. I mean, in this region, these type of developments normally, like, the heavy with infrastructure, but water is generally below ground. But we wanted to celebrate in it, actually use it as a way of defining the layout. So clusters of villas surround these bodies of water. Consideration of views through the site, out of the site, but also within the site are driving factors. This is a diagram that talks about all the different types of water on the site, how it's all linked together in a circular way. And we're working with some absolutely incredible consultants. This is Atelier 10 and Andrew Grant and Elliot Wood, who are helping us develop kind of sustainable ways of using water. And we really want this to be a pioneering scheme within the region that is demonstrates how development should be done. Thermal comfort, again, similar to the Supermax project, is really key. We want people to experience the outside as much as possible, minimize air conditioning use. But to do that, the outside has to be a space in which you can use. So integrating lots of shading, architectural structures that prevent the sun directly hitting you, lots of landscaping. So the diagram on the left represents the solar radiation if we weren't to include any strategies to mitigate that. The one in the middle shows the effect of introduction of landscape and architectural shading structures, so that the outside becomes this place that's as much inhabitable as the inside. Buildings are very much driven by passive design strategies. So air movement is incredibly key in a tropical climate for the perception of cooling, and integrating nature as well. So these are some of the kind of the visuals, the end of concept visuals of these are the apartment buildings with these diamond tip gardens, water bodies that provide amenity spaces. We're harvesting bamboo on one of the client's sites next to this site that will form building materials, and the concrete here is pigmented with earth that's actually taken from the ground here. So we're trying to like minimize cut and fill in the region and create low embodied carbon concrete. Villas are all lifted off the ground, so the ground plane becomes this. We're trying to touch the ground as lightly as possible. Nature can run through the ground plane and forms a shaded space. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
that. Your practices work is so beautiful. It was really inspiring to see all your different projects. I guess we'll open up for questions now. I actually had a few questions myself. Firstly, I just wanted to talk about how your work is often very intricate and it's very like detailed, and I was you specifically play around a lot with light. You can see that a lot in your work, and I was wondering how, like, as a student who is currently like exploring different ways of designing, how you would encourage us to kind of design it in a similarly intricate way.
I think for me, it's just being inquisitive, like really like, you know, the world at the moment, you know, with the Twitter storms and everything, it's all, you know, it's your mind and your eyes can go everywhere, but it's about the real, what's the reality, what's the real fundamental thing you're trying to do, you know. And it could be a door handle, it could be a master plan for 400 units, something simple, you know, what you're making for dinner, but just really find out what the good ingredients are and do it really well. Keep it simple. That would be my advice, you know. If it's concrete, find out everything about concrete, pigment it, cast it properly. if it's timber, you know, pick and choose. Don't sort of do too many things too complicatedly. Choose something beautiful, stick with it, and really learn it properly.
Yeah, thank you. And just a bit of a fun one. I was wondering, Simon, what your favorite thing about studying at Portsmouth was.
Oh, that's a tough one. It wasn't driving down the M275 every day. It wasn't that. Well,
got to be Roger now.
Do you know what? Honestly, I was without embarrassing Roger. It's probably Roger, because we, like I said before, everyone came on Jubilee. Roger was my tutor, my thesis tutor, my friend. We went traveling together. We wrote papers together, and now we collaborate on live projects together. You know, and we're doing this lecture. So I would say it's Roger.
Wow, that's beautiful. And then, sorry, just one more question. But you were talking about the project for the glove company, and I was wondering, like, I'm not really sure how the gloves are made, but I know your practice is trying to pioneer kind of sustainability. I'm not sure how sustainable making gloves is, but I was just wondering how you kind of approach that in a way, if you understand my question.
Nicholas, want to go for
that? Yeah, I mean, I suppose as architects, you know, we're given a brief, and we try to, you know, do the best we can with that brief. You know, so I think like with the building itself, which is the bit that we have control over, we do everything that we can to design it in a responsible way that is sustainably, in terms of energy use, but also socially sustainable. So it's you know, there's hundreds of people who work here. You know, how do you improve their lives through the use of this building, and how do you make it a better place, a more productive place? How do you make it perform better in terms of the energy it uses, in terms of its operational energy, but also the embodied energy as well. So, you know, we do as much as what we can with, you know, with the bits that we have control of, if that makes sense. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add, Simon.
No, that's good.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see Roger has a question.
Simon, I'm very touched by your words. Thank you. I've known you for a long time. I've known Nicholas for a smaller amount of time, but what really would interest me is some kind of commentary about how coming together from separate practices, yeah, has added to the dimension of both of your works, because, you know, I kind of picked up some key words. There's something for both of you about going back. There's something for both of you about narrative. There's something for both of you about ritual. And there seems to be something for both of you about collaboration. And I find those to be really, really exciting key words in taking architecture forward, because each of those words are describing new paradigms for thinking about our practice.
Yeah, well said, Rog. Absolutely. I mean, we are, obviously we're a year in. We're, as I said at the beginning, we're still thinking our way through, and yep. It'll be an evolving thing. But I mean, like when we first started talking about potentially coming together, it's just we do share a really strong set of values on what architecture, people, just decent people, be good to the planet, and you know, work hard and build a team, and we share all those values. And I think that, and then for me the moment was when we started talking about it quite seriously, we both did mood boards of each other's work, and we put images on. And honestly, I had images of our previous projects and Nick's as well, and it did look like one practice, especially with the themes we've been talking about today. So I think it's going to be evolving, and absolutely all those things you mentioned, collaboration in particular, and other practices as well. You know, we're working with concept designers who work under our umbrella, don't work under our umbrella. We work with artists, all sorts of people. So yeah.
Can you talk to me also about geese, Simon?
So when a goose takes off, they don't do it on their own. Especially if they've got to fly a fair distance, they're always in odd numbers, 3s and 5s and 7s, as you may notice, and they form a V. They form a V formation. And the reason they form that is because aerodynamics. They have to do less work for when they fly over, I don't know, Gibraltar Straits or wherever they fly over. So the first goose is taking the brunt of the work and the friction, and the geese behind are doing 30% less work. And what they do, they take turns and they rotate, and they all do the even amount of work, the least amount of work, but the most efficient way of doing it. So I think that kind of analogy of architects as being geese is quite a good one. You know, when you're at the front, you've got to do it. You've got people backing you up behind, and then you should swap. So yeah.
I think we've just got a question in the chat from someone called Admin. They said, could you please tell us more about communication process with clients? What is your good way to describe a good idea and convince the client?
I'll quickly talk, because I know for a fact we've got one of our clients on this call, so they'd probably be better to answer that than me. But I don't know. I mean, it is about communication. It's about being honest, because, you know, selling dreams, you know, and not fulfilling those dreams is not a very nice thing, you know, in any walk of life. So it's about selling dreams, but it's actually about making it reality, and that's the hard work. Don't know if you want to add anything, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super interested in communication. I mean, my passion is one of the very reasons I kind of became an architect. So I love drawing, I love making, I love mending things. You know, and I love you know, so that we have so many discussions about how do you represent an idea, what is the right tool for representing that idea, and we work across so much different types of media, you know, depending on what we're trying to represent. Yeah, so you know, and there's benefits to you know, a hand sketch. You know, hand sketches are incredibly important for very quickly and intuitively understanding something. And you know, sketches, it's like this common language across the world. We do quite a lot of international projects, and it's although the language might not be quite there, you know, the sketches, it can be translated, you know, it's like this completely democratic way of communicating, you know, whereas the more polished visualizations are produced for more commercial, kind of developer-led, you know, more, it's a slightly different audience that you're targeting. So it all depends on the audience, it all depends on what you're trying to do, really.
And also, I think it's important for architects to, you know, read psychology and neurology. It really is, because especially in the world we live in now, where it's moving, it's really important to understand when you need to pull off and when you need to push clients and their reactions, and just being a good reader of people, I think is a valuable skill for architects.
Thank you guys for that. There's another question from Susanna. I don't know if she wants to unmute.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi. Lovely to meet you both, Simon and Nicholas. Your presentation was absolutely inspirational. It's beautiful. So thank you for that. I have a question to do with your imagery. Do you have any advice on how to capture the texture and the feeling and the atmosphere? Like, the emotions in your photographs are amazing. So I was just wondering if you have any advice on how to present that and capture it. both in videos and
Yeah, no,
posted.
I think what Nicholas was saying in the previous answer is you know, using different mediums, and we all both got taught that at university. You know, sometimes you can sometimes you can get a quote from someone and just give it to someone, and it can convey a really good idea. But obviously we do all the things that we talk about in our materials, and we're lucky because we work with really talented people as well, like photographers and filmmakers and draftspeople, and you know, architects and student architects with lots of skills in modeling and stuff. So I would say, yeah, surround yourself with good people, and yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything, Nick.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you.
I've actually got a quick question. I was just wondering, you showed some projects of different scales. I was wondering how your design approach differs on each of those different scales.
Do you want me to take that one? Yeah, quite often asked that question. In some ways, it's quite similar. You know, there are similarities. You know, we kind of go through a process where, I mean, generally the first thing that we always do is understand the context around the project. And when I say context, I don't just mean the built context. You know, I mean like the historical context, the context of climate, the forgotten histories of a site. There's kind of all these layers of different things to really know something, and what we often find is that there are certain observations that we make that we're intuitively like say resonate with us, and then they start to drive a concept idea. You know, so it becomes like this constellation of different layers that all kind of relate and interconnect, and then we test them through drawing and models and until an idea starts to reveal itself. And in some ways, although a project such as a master plan is very different to an installation project, that fundamental process of experimentation and prototyping is common across all the scales, really. Of course, there's a complexity to a master plan that doesn't exist in an installation project or a piece of product design, but fundamentally that research kind of based approach is always there.
That's great, thank you. There's another question in the chat, I believe, as well. I don't know if you wanted to read it out, or do you want me to read it out for you?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, sorry.
What was your favorite material to work with to capture the texture and light? And also, when working with the caramelized sugar, did that make you very hungry, or did you get sick of it?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, you go for it.
Yeah, with the caramel, it's quite interesting. My dad used to work for Thornton's Chocolates, actually, so I used to get to visit their factory. Initially, like the first day going there, it was like this incredible immersive smell of chocolate. But then after spending the day there, I wondered how he'd managed for the past few years. So it becomes so potent and sickly. I can't really say there's a favorite material that I enjoy working with. But I do enjoy the moment when you find something within a material that surprises you. So for instance, the caramel, everybody has this perception about what caramel is, but through a process of experimentation and testing, something new was revealed about that material. That's the thing that kind of really excites me. The kind of the latent potential of a material, rather than going, I like metal more than wood. I could be equally interested by both, but it's kind of what you do with it, how you work it, and how you exploit its potential. That's the thing that really excites me.
And don't we, Nick? We always we push each other. Like if I'm doing a metal stair, it's like, well, we can't do a black one because we've done that 3 years ago. What do we do with it? Oh, let's dip it in these tanks, or let's, one idea that we're trying to convince a client of, which one client almost went for, is to have a perforated metal stair, and you spray it in like this reflective mirror. So it's like almost like stainless, really shiny stainless steel, and it'd be like floating on the clouds going up. The material won't exist; it's just light bouncing around. So we're always trying to push, like, not just like, what, okay, timber cladding, okay, what can we do to this timber? How can it react in this way? So I think we're really experimental and like questioning about normal materials, basically.
Have we got any more questions from anyone?
Oh, there's one from James.
Oh yeah.
I can read it out. So he said, it's great to hear from Simon. Used to study with him at Portsmouth undergrad. I see that a lot of your work incorporates a lot of nature, trees, and landscape. How much of your work and design work is inspired by the order of nature?
Yeah, everything. Like, I think especially the last year, you know, we thought humans have got this thing, okay, it's us and our technology and our improvements and then nature, but we've realized in the last 12 months we are nature. And, you know, if we break this shirt down, this computer screen, humans, we're all just like these particles, and it's all the same thing. So nature is, yeah, just one encompassing thing, isn't it? And it's obviously, we work and live in nature, so it's always going to influence our jobs. Yeah, well, like,
yeah, I mean, I think, sorry, Simon. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we're becoming more conscious of is, I mean, the new kind of David Attenborough series, where he talks about how we're starting to imbalance this incredibly delicate system, you know, through the acts that we make as humans. You know, and it comes back to that really original Batinsky image, you know, the consequences of our actions, you know, and how that has an impact on the ecosystem. And it's our kind of responsibility as much as we can as architects, you know, when we make a decision, that we work as complementary to that circular system as possible, and not disbalance the equilibrium.
Yeah, exactly. Like a culture that removes coal from the earth strata and then burns it and puts it into the sky. It's just, what a culture, you know. That's all wrong. So, and it's damaging everything. So, and we're just, like everyone is, trying to find solutions to work around that carbon use.
So we've got another one in the chat. How do you think it could be the construction? How do you think it could be the construction process in Cambodia with those wet climate conditions?
Yeah, but we like Nicholas was describing, this is at a concept stage, moving into schematic stage shortly. We haven't been able to travel there because of COVID restrictions. We're hoping to do it later this year. But again, it's using local knowledge. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel, you know. It's looking back at indigenous architecture, lifting things off the ground. There's reasons why people don't build brick heavy buildings in those climates, is because they would flood, and you know, and there's abundance of timber. So I think it would be a learning curve for us for sure, but we've got a fantastic team who do have a lot of experience of building in the area and award-winning in that area. So we're hoping to feed off their knowledge. And like I say, all of our international projects, we pair with local architects who have local knowledge, who do all the permissions and planning applications, and they kind of like shadow us and we shadow them during construction. So very collaborative way of working.
I think we'll call that the last question.
Can I just?
Oh, Roger, yeah.
Sorry. You both talked earlier about the relationship between science and poetry. And I know, Simon, your interest in neuroscience. How does that kind of feed into the way you're thinking about architecture?
Holistically, all encompassingly, if that's a word.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. There's a. If you guys haven't checked it out, there's a university in San Diego where they have conferences called ANFA, International Conference on Neuroscience and Architecture. And it's neurologists and architects just sitting down chatting. And, you know, all of the things that we know or we get taught or feel as architects, you know, when you go into a Gaudi cathedral and the space and the light and like tingle in the back of your neck, that's a feeling, yeah, and everyone has a different feeling, but there is documented neurological pathways of neurons connecting to different parts of your body that is actually explained by science. And we, you know, we can control that as architects by a ceiling at a certain height or a roof light in a certain location or the touch of a chair. You know, things are happening in our brain the whole time, you know, and in reacting to our environment. And it's been hugely documented. It's only about 10 years old, this kind of knowledge, and it's going to be a huge part of what we do as architects. And, you know, soon we'll be having the headgear on with the clients and walking through these spaces and changing them based on the neurological reactions of clients, right, in data.
Can I finally just thank Jubilee and Ben, who have done an amazing job curating this fantastic series of lectures, which includes you two guys, Simon, Nicholas. They're being recorded and they're going out free of source. So, you know, I can't thank you guys highly enough for doing what you've done. And you provided an enormous resource for PSA, which is kind of now out there.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to work with, I must say, very professional. And yeah, we've really enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting us. And we hope to come back next year, semester 1, to talk to you about new projects.
Thanks so much, guys. There are actually a few more questions if you have time. They just creeped in at the last minute.
Yeah. Let's do a couple, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I think there's only 2.
Yeah. Beth, Karen, are you asking about this our university or a different university? Because we're Portsmouth University. Oh, the neuro one. Sorry. What was the neuro university?
So the abbreviation acronym is ANFA, A-N-F-A. So if you Google like San Diego Architecture Neurology University, it will come up. And there's huge amounts of books written on it, and there's conferences. I attended one online a few months ago. Yeah, you should check it out, guys.
Wow, that's really cool. And then Jackie has asked that like if any of us make anything that kind of follows that sensory kind of theory or way of thinking in terms of architecture, could they tag you on Instagram?
Of course.
And then this is like a proper question. Are there any tips on executing these beautiful conceptual ideas with technical elements? Has it ever been a challenge? And that's from Prasanna Wong.
Do you want that one, Nicholas?
Yeah, I can give it a go. I suppose the Caramel project kind of encapsulates a lot of this answer, but yeah, I mean, it's about perseverance, you know, and willing to fail. You know, a lot of the experiment, you know, I was like, that project's been an ongoing project for, you know, 5 years or so post university, and not every experiment was successful. Some that I thought were unsuccessful, there were actually ideas within that kind of spurred a new avenue of exploration. So I think it's just being open and willing to learn, and yeah, I mean, like kind of I kind of love the understanding like the scientifics of a material or a technique or a technology, and how that might help you implement and enforce an idea that you might have had. Yeah, I mean, I suppose for you, Simon, it's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, but Nicholas's studies and his thesis, which relate to climate change and sugar, the properties of sugar, you know, really, I definitely influenced his and my work. You know, and we don't think that project's finished yet. It's going to keep evolving. Hopefully, it'll be involved in some sort of architecture show one day soon. It was almost in one last year until COVID hit. So, you know, it's a continuing thing. And you know, I talk a lot about food and like the dolly mixtures and the staircases, and you know, that's I think a part of it as well. Keep pushing and experimenting, guys.
Thank you very much, guys. That was amazing. I mean, very inspiring, and I'm definitely going to take some things away from today. It's given me some ideas, so I hope everyone else has as well.
Can I just say, Ben, I mean, tonight we've had 60 people in the room.
That's the most I think we've had. I'm pretty sure.
Record.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we can
Amazing.
build on that going into the future. But, you know, it also registers the value of contributions from people like Simon and Nick to our PSA community. So thanks to everyone that turned up, and most of all, thanks to Simon and Nicholas that turned up.
Definitely.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good evening.
Have a great evening, everyone. Bye.
Thanks
Bye.
everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.